Hey there. Glad you could take a few minutes today. I'm going to talk about the notion of we need more reminders than alarms in our lives. And if you don't know the difference between those two things, then I'll explain what that is and why it's important in the overall notion of productivity. So, in order to understand this better, I've coined the term task signals. And a task signal is anything that brings a task to mind. So a note or an alarm or anything like that that helps you recall an intent to do something. Okay. Now, task signals are really important to productivity generally, and they're huge in the attention compass system for two reasons. One is our goal is to have a clear mind. Okay. So we don't want a whole bunch of stuff up here that can distract us while we're trying to put our attention directly on our work. And when we're trying to do that, we also recognize that many of our tasks have to be postponed, right? We make the decision that I'm going to do X now, which means that we're not doing all of the Y's, okay? I'm going to do this one thing, which means I need to be able to ignore, for a clear mind, I need to be able to ignore the billions of other possible things I could be doing. Now, we ignore them temporarily, and we ignore them purposefully. Either I want to do X now because it's the highest priority task, or I want to do X now because it's the right context, and priority and context kind of overlap, but you get the idea. And if it's not if Y is not the most urgent task, or it's not the right context to do Y, we want to put it somewhere where we'll see it again. And that notion of seeing it again is this idea of the task signal. Now, it may seem like a new term, but we do task signaling all the time. And I will argue that the tools that we have at our disposal tend to put us in a position where our task signaling system is not a very good one. Okay, here we go again, right? But it's very, very important in the attention compass philosophy that we be able to capture the thought of needing to do something, recognize that that thing does not need to be done now, and then create a task signal so that we don't forget about the task. Because if we start forgetting about things, then they'll start lodging in our skulls and they will distract us at times when we don't want that to be true. Right. So we want to be able to focus on things. And if we've got a whole bunch of stuff up here, as I've said many times elsewhere, if we've got a bunch of stuff up here, then it's going to be firing at us while we're trying to put our attention where it's most productive for right now. So task signals. So there are at least two kinds of task signals. And what I mean by that is there are high urgency task signals and there are low urgency task signals. And there may be other kinds, and I'll think about it some more. And if it's important, I'll bring it up to you sometime. A high urgency task signal is what I think of as an alarm. Okay, so the use of an alarm is an alarm clock. It gets you up in the morning. Okay. For that purpose, alarm type signals are designed to interrupt us. They're designed to capture our attention regardless of where our attention might be, and prompt us usually to do something. Okay, so alarm clock, kitchen timer, even the useful Pomodoro timer is an alarm style signal, right? The Pomodoro is a little bit different because it's not actually a task signal, it's a task and signal, but you get the idea. Our systems are heavily weighted towards alarm style task signals. Okay. Your calendar app, if you put a reminder on a calendar event, then it produces an alarm type signal to you. It beeps and pops up a box and all these sorts of things. And so in most of the available task signals are alarm style. The other kind is a reminder style, which specifically does not try to jump up and capture your attention. It sits there in a place that we know to go look for it. And so our habit is to go to that place and look for these reminders in order to determine what we might need to engage with next. And so that's the difference between alarms and reminders. It's a little confusing because in calendar systems, they talk about setting a reminder for a meeting. And I get it, but it's not really a reminder style. It's more of an alarm style task signal. Beep, you got a meeting coming up in 10 minutes. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that alarm style task signals are not useful. They are very useful. I'm just saying that they're not the only useful kind of task signals. Okay. So I think the problem, though, is that alarm style are so common that we think it's the only way to have task signals. Okay. And I'll talk briefly, I'm going to expand on this elsewhere, but I'll talk briefly about the situation when you need an alarm style task signal and the situations when you need a reminder style. Because if all we have is alarm style, then they're going off all day long at different times and different places, and you can't get your attention focused where you think it needs to be. And I presume that makes sense. So alarms are intended to grab your attention, regardless of what you're doing. I mean, an alarm clock grabs your attention when your attention is off sleeping. So it's designed to do that. And it does a very good job. It's loud, you know, all kinds of different things. Different people use different kinds of alarms, but traditionally an alarm clock is a very insistent and persistent signal, right? It goes, and then it doesn't stop until you slap it. Don't get me started on the snooze button. But a reminder style task signal sits somewhere outside of our skulls, and we build the habit of going in and consulting our reminder task signal list. And then we make a conscious decision of which task we're going to take on. Okay, so think of the tickler file is really a great example of a set of task signals that are reminder style, in the sense that, you know, your tickler file is not going to jump out at you. You do some work, you finish that work, you deliver that work, and you go to your tickler file and you say, okay, what's next, right? And we really implement this with great functionality in the attention compass system. But a tickler file is a good way to begin to implement this kind of thinking. So my point is, we overuse alarm style systems. That causes interruption in our workday. It causes us to not be able to best focus our attention, and it generally raises our level of urgency and or stress, right? I mean, it's a stressful thing for an alarm to go off. I live in Alabama, and we have tornado sirens, and they test them at noon on the first Wednesday of every month. And when that goes off, everybody knows it. It gets your attention, and that's its purpose. So in that vein, alarms are for tasks that must start now. You must get the cookies out of the oven now or they're going to burn. You must go to your safe place now because there's a tornado on the way. And so that's the purpose of alarm style. You must wake up now or else you're going to, miss A, B, and C. So reminder style is more of I know that a task needs to be completed by such and such date. Okay. Alarms are pretty useless for a task that is not a must begin at style task. And I'll go into some detail on this in another post, but you get the idea. And if your task is a must be completed by task, then when do you set the alarm? Right? Setting it at the due date is useless, right? All that's going to tell you is, oops, you missed your deadline, right? And so people use hacks and they say, okay, well, then what I'll do with this alarm style, my default thinking is an alarm style task signal. And so I'll set the alarm style task signal a certain amount of time or days before the due date. And then that alarm will go off and it'll remind me of this deadline. Well, that's a way to do it. But if you have a reminder style system and you utilize the habit of using that reminder style system effectively, then you'll know that these deadlines are coming up and you'll know what task needs to be performed now in order to execute your plan for doing work and meeting that deadline. So the call to action here today, this is kind of an abstract kind of a video, but I do have some application for you. So think about your own work environment and think about how many alarms you have going off during a day, right? Another kind of alarm is a ringing phone or a dinging text, okay? And phones ring because there is sort of a must begin at task. You need to answer the phone while the other person is still on the line, right? Now, why texts by default ding at us is another question. But all of those dinging, pinging alarms get your attention at what is probably the wrong time. And so we want to minimize the use of alarm style timers and increase the use of reminder style timers. And that's what attention compass is all about. So think about how many alarm style reminders you have in your world, right? Those that jump up and grab your attention. Think about how many tasks in your world are actually must begin at tasks versus must be completed by tasks. Okay, and I think you'll begin to see that mismatch between the nature of the work that you need to do and the style of task signaling that is the most common and therefore the easiest to use. And then we'll start to see this mismatch. If you do see that mismatch, then you want to create for yourself a reminder style task signaling system. And probably the easiest conceptually and kind of really technically is the tickler file system. And so I've got a video on creating tickler files. You can do it physically with manila folders and paper, or you can do it electronically with Windows folders on your desktop. So we have some resources for training you how to do that. It's not hard, it doesn't take long, and it helps you build in a reminder style task signal tool into your life, right? Because one of the reasons, I argue, one of the reasons that we use so many alarm style task signals is because that's the easiest thing to do. And we kind of just use them without thinking that maybe there's another better option for many of the tasks that we try to do. So if you want to look further into the tickler file system, I've got free resources for that. Happy to share that with you. We talk about how to do it, what the folders look like, how to use them, And we also talk about how a tickler file, either physical or electronic, fits into the larger attention compass work philosophy. So be happy to share that with you. Feel free to comment, like the post, however that works. You probably know better how to do that than I do. But reach out to me, ping me on LinkedIn or give me a comment here, and we'll talk about what the best way is to deliver the tickler file process into your world. So again, thanks for taking a few minutes. I hope this has been really valuable to you and you've gotten actionable information out of it. And as I say, this is one of a group of videos that I'm going to do about this whole task signaling idea. So look for some more videos coming up. I hope you're having a great week. I want you to get out there and do busy right.